right, guys, I have some more Aggie watch list stuff for you going into 2024. This time we're going to focus on some sleepers. Last week, we did some players with breakout potential, guys that are very likely to see the field and can make a name for themselves. This list, we're going to hit a couple more of those, but we're mostly going to focus on guys that have kind of some make or miss chances of seeing the field in meaningful stretches this year. On this list, we're going to start from the most surefire contributors, and as we work our way down, some guys that are kind of some more shots in the dark, sleepers, if you will. So, guys, thank you for being here. Before we get into it, rehashing a couple guys that we mentioned last show on the Breakout Players video. We had a coach presser today on Saturday when I'm recording this. It just happened a few minutes ago. And we got confirmation that Terry Bussey is seeing a lot of time on offense. We also got a clip from the social media feed of Texas A&M of Terry Bussey wearing a maroon jersey with number 2 on it. Maroon in practice is the offensive side of the ball. The first week of practice, he was wearing white. He was in maroon. So read into that what you will. We did hear from Elko that they're going to move him around. They're going to use him on offense. You're going to see him on offense. That's pretty much hammered in at this point. And Colin Klein also was asked where you might see him on offense. And he said, you'll see him out wide, great route runner, great ball skills. And then he said you'll also see him in the backfield a little bit. Just as we talked about here on this channel, they're going to move him around. You're not going to say he's a down-to-down running back. You're not going to say he's a down-to-down receiver. But he could be a down-to-down or drive-to-drive weapon. I don't know if he's a down-to-down player, actually, now that I'm saying this. But I think you're going to see him pretty regularly on offense based on the needs of this team this year. This offense is begging for some explosive players, and that definitely factored into my creation of this list. You're going to see at least one guy with potential to have some explosive stuff this season. So, guys, thanks for being here. Like and subscribe if you like this kind of content. I'm going to keep putting stuff out all the way through the season. Thank you guys for being here, commenting your thoughts. And while I go through this list, comment any guys that I miss or guys that you just don't agree with me on. That's fine. I want to hear from you guys. Thank you for being here. Let's get into it. So once again, we're going to start from some guys that are pretty likely to make an impact, and we're going to taper off some guys that have a little bit lower chance, but could bust onto the scene. It's going to be a lot of fun when we get to some of those names. Those names are going to be for the sickos out there that are trying to keep a really keen eye on this roster like I have. But all right, let's start with Armaj Reed Adams. He's a guy that transferred in from Kansas to play offensive line here at Texas A&M. From the moment he stepped foot on campus, players and coaches have talked about him. He's a big guy at 6'5", 330, very experienced upperclassman. He's a redshirt junior. He's appeared in 31 games, including 15 starts for Kansas. And based on fall camp reports and based on the minimal glimpses we're getting, and I'll segue or just kind of take an aside to say this is a very tight-lipped fall camp for good reason. There's no film on Elko, Klein, Bateman, and this version of the roster together, and that will be the case when you take on Notre Dame week 1 as opposed to when you would have taken on, say, a Clemson in week 2 or a Miami in week 2, where they get to look at the previous week of film on the team. Notre Dame won't have that for Texas A&M. They'll go back and look at Colin Klein's scheme and tendencies. They'll look back at Mike Elko defenses, but they won't see it with this iteration of the team at all. They also don't know much about the personnel decisions that Elko and company will be making. Also, they won't know injury statuses. They won't know what level of play they're going to get from Donovan Green or see from Donovan Green. They won't know what they're going to get from Connor Wigman. Is he truly 100%? They're trying to keep everything tight-lipped as possible. Going back to Armaj, there have been leaks on the social medias from coaches, from insiders, that he's been running with the ones through most of fall camp. And most recently, we've seen him starting at right tackle in this offensive line group. It sounds like he's going to be a down-to-down player. He had a fall camp presser last week. Really cool guy, funny, down-to-earth dude. He's going to play a big role. And I've been saying he represents a solid floor for this offensive line. That's why you go out and get players like him that are experienced and solid. And he was part of a group that turned Kansas around, right? Kansas was anemic for seasons before the last couple of years, finally finding some success. His freshman year, they were a 2-win team. His last season there, they were a 9-win team. So he's a productive player who's learned how to win. Look for him to make an early impact. And in that same vein, Kalinu Fayu. It's pronounced Fayu, I have found out. The transfer out of Utah started the last 8 games at center for the team last year. I don't know if he's a plus-plus player, but just like Armaj, he definitely is a floor raiser, especially now that Bryce Foster's out of the program. He's definitely given Mark Naboo a run for his money, and in those same clips where we saw Armaj Reed Adams, we're seeing Naboo starting at right guard and Fowey at center. So he has made waves and kind of forced the issue in this center battle. Now, it's no guarantee that that's your day one starter, but that's where things stood the last glimpse we got. Look for him to play a big role. He's a big dude in his own right. Very productive, experienced player. And one thing that A&M's, relative weakness in offensive line will have over Notre Dame's weakness in offensive line, now down a player due to injury, is that whoever A&M throws out there, they're going to have college experience. Now, whatever that's worth, at least we have that going for us, and that also extends into the depth of this room. So a lot of players with a lot of games played, and these two transfers, right now, they're kind of projecting as starters, so keep an eye out for them. Now, here's a guy we've talked a lot about, and if you watch my linebacker video, you know that there's a three-head race for the outside linebacker position starting next to Torian York. A guy that has seemed to quietly been continuing to make waves in camp is Daymion Sanford. He's the one that's been around as opposed to the ones that just joined the team in Solomon DeShields and Scooby Williams. Great reports from all three, but I think Daymion Sanford looks special, just in my opinion, in the glimpses we've gotten. His body transformation, his athleticism, his speed. I think he might be the perfect complement next to Torian York, where Torian York is kind of the squattier, textbook style of player, strong player. I think Sanford brings the most athletic player you can put next to Torian York on the field at that linebacker 2 spot, at that outside linebacker spot. Now, I don't know if he starts game one. He might. He's remained soundly in that battle, but he's going to play. All four of those linebackers play, and I would not be surprised, even if he doesn't start game one, he may eventually become a starter on this team. I think he has tremendous potential as an outside linebacker, and, I don't even know if this guy belongs on a sleeper list at this point, but I'm going to put him there because he might not even be a starter game one. But he could be. Keep your eyes peeled for Daymion Sanford to make waves this season. Now we're going to keep on the defensive side of the ball here. And this is a guy I've briefly mentioned a couple of times. I mentioned him on Twitter a couple times. But it's Josh Salazar, the defensive end out of UCF. He's a guy that I continue to sleep on. I forget exactly what he is. You talk about this defensive line, you're obviously going to talk about the monsters at the top of the room. And let me be very clear. For this defense to achieve that status of elite, that I have been touting them with the potential to be elite. I've been saying this can be an elite defense. You need both Shamars and Nick Scorton healthy. But this D-line also has good quality depth, and that is thanks in large part to players like Josh Salazar. We already mentioned Cassius Howell. We mentioned up-and-coming players like Rylan Kennedy. But Josh Salazar can kind of be an unsung sub, unsung rotational hero for this defense, if you will. He's a 2-year team captain on UCF, leadership qualities. He has like 50 games played, like 35 starts in his career. In the last 2 years, he's had 44 and 48 tackles, respectively. He's a big dude, strong side defensive end, 6'4", 265. We've already heard Jay Bateman praise him and talk about how he can maybe be a guy that you slide inside at times, move around the defensive line at times. Another versatile player, and we know Mike Elko prioritizes versatile players in his talent acquisition philosophy. This guy fits that mold, and this is a guy I would be very surprised we don't see regularly this fall making an impact off the bench. Very quality depth piece right here. Very, very high-end depth piece, and he really bet on himself transferring to A&M with this very loaded defensive end room, and he's quoted as saying that coming into the program because this is his last year of eligibility. So you're getting just a senior grad transfer veteran leader in this room as a rotational piece. That's huge, and we cannot forget about him. A lot of similar things can be said about Rodas Johnson. A little bit less experience, but still almost full 2 years of starting under his belt, like 35 games played. A guy that's averaged 21 tackles a year over his last 2 years, mostly as a starter. He's a guy that's 300 pounds. He was kind of versatile, like a hybrid defensive end / interior guy. Now he's truly bought into that defensive end mold. And if you watch the pressers today on Saturday, I'm recording this, we just heard Jay Bateman rave about this guy and talk about how he's really happy with his intelligence and his just the way he's kind of made himself part of the program. So Rodas Johnson, absolutely in the rotation. It's going to be DJ Hicks. It's going to be Albert Regis, and you're going to see Rodas Johnson play and Josh Salazar. These are two guys that we cannot forget about. Surefire players. Are they really sleepers? Not entirely, but I kind of sleep on them, so I'm throwing them in here. You're going to see them play. Now, as we move down this list, we're going to start getting into guys that maybe not guaranteed to see. I would be hard-pressed to say any of those guys I've already mentioned aren't seeing the field on Saturdays this fall. But the rest of this list, there's some positive momentum here, but these are true sleepers. You don't know for sure what you're going to get out of these guys, so I don't want you to go and on X and say, oh, Drew said these guys are starting. No. These are guys that have a really good chance to make an impact, though. Let's start with someone we're familiar with. A couple of guys we're familiar with. First of all, defensive side of the ball. Very well documented how this defensive back room has transformed. A bunch of exciting guys come in. To this corner room, you have Des Ricks, Will Lee, BJ Mays entering the program. You still have Tyreek Chappelle. Looks like he's playing some nickel now and looking really good there. But we forget to mention some of the guys that were already here. Javen Thomas earned himself a starting role last season. And yes, that was a bad cornerback room. But he was still a true freshman in an SEC room, and he earned the right to start last season. Prototype size, prototype build, athletic. He learned last year. He learned several tough lessons last year. But we're hearing from insiders and coaches, Jay Bateman mentioned him today, that this is a guy that is making himself known, and he's really elevated his game this camp. So very, very slight chance that he's a starter. Maybe he's a starter game one. But Bateman also said that just because you're not starting in this DB room doesn't mean you're not going to play. I think we're going to see Javen Thomas play this season. I think he's going to make himself a player in this crowded room, and that is a full testament to what he has done for himself and the steps he has taken in his career. But like I said, you're not a starter. Doesn't mean you're not going to play. Keep that in mind for another player I'm about to mention a couple guys down this list. Back to the offensive side of the ball, and this is a guy that's picking up some momentum lately, guys. This is a hot topic right now. We've been seeing him in some social media posts. We're hearing the coaches talk about how he's continued to compete and make a name for himself. He's a sophomore now, a redshirt freshman, Micah Tease, early enrollee last season. We forget what Micah Tease is. He was a highly sought-after recruit coming out of high school. He was a 4-star recruit, a top 130 player out of Oklahoma. He held offers from Alabama, LSU, Notre Dame. A bunch of big programs wanted this guy. Now, what he brings to the table, potentially, is exactly what this offense needs. He has some nice top-end speed, some explosive ability. He could potentially be a home run threat, the type of player that this offense is looking for. The reason you're bringing Terry Bussey more onto the offensive side of the ball at this juncture in camp. You need this kind of player. And from reports, he's making really strong plays in camp right now. He's a guy that has been really under the radar and maybe just outright quiet in his career as an Aggie thus far. Didn't draw many praises his first spring, didn't draw a lot of attention this last spring or the summer. But now we're hearing the buzz. And we heard today Colin Klein say that this receiver room, 3 to 4 mainstays, but you're going to dip into the bag as far as 6 players in. So I think we're pretty sure the 4 mainstays you're going to see are Noah Thomas, Ja'Day Walker, Cyrus Allen, the transfer out of La Tech, and of course Moose Muhammad. I think Micah Tease might be that 5th guy. Micah Tease is making a name for himself right now in camp. He's ramping up as we speak. Keep an eye out for him. Now, sticking on the offensive side of the ball, I have made my thoughts on Donovan Green well known. I don't think he's a big-time contributor early in this season. If he is a contributor this year, he's going to take some time to get back into form. He obviously put on some weight this offseason, obviously coming off an ACL. Obviously, we should not expect Donovan Green to be himself game 1, maybe game 2, maybe till the midway point of the year. So having said that, in the last video for breakout players, I threw Trey Watson into that bag. And I think Trey Watson's going to play a huge role in the receiving tight end realm this season early and often. I think he's going to be a great player for us. But he's a solid blocker, but that's not his forte. He's not what you would call a true hybrid. He's not a true do-it-all tight end. He's serviceable in blocking, but he's better at kind of sealing guys off and kind of getting that last guy at the end, a touch on them, slowing them down. This team needs a really good blocking tight end to emerge, and I think that guy is Theo Mellon-Orstrom. He's been here a couple of years. It's well documented by now exactly what he is. He's the Swede, coming from a different version of football from overseas, also reclassified. He's a year younger than his grade, so he's a redshirt sophomore, a junior in school, but he's the age of a true sophomore. He looks huge. He looks big. He looks athletic in camp, and we heard today Colin Klein mention him as the first tight end that wasn't named Trey Watson in that kind of who's going to be the guy that steps up in that tight end room. He was the first guy he mentioned. I already had him on this list before he did that, so I feel very validated in my prediction here. I think we're going to see a lot of Theo this fall. He's played a lot, kind of under the radar, not a bunch of usage, but he's been on the field. He's been a blocker. He's been a target a couple times. He's been running routes, but I think this is the year where you really see the offense start to lean on him. Colin Klein complimented his power, his ability to block, And, dude, he looks like he can block. He's thick. He's long. I mean, he's a big dude. I think we're going to rely on him a lot this season. So keep your eyes open for Theo Mellon-Nordstrom. But, of course, several options there. You still have Donovan Green. Maybe he can emerge into that second tight end role earlier in the year than we thought. You still have Shane Calhoun out of East Carolina. Those are guys that can still make waves. You still have Jaden Platt, but I think Theo is that tight end 2 of the room as of right now. Keep an eye out for it. Back to the defensive side of the ball. We've done a lot of talking about the defensive line. I'm going to mention one more guy here. This is the last one I'm going to mention, I promise. So, of course, wealth of riches there right now. Like I said, focused at the top, focused at a couple of those high-end sub pieces. But a guy that's really fallen under the radar lately is Malik Silla. Malik Silla is a guy that's been around for a while. Surprisingly, he's appeared in 25 games to this point. He played every game as a freshman. He appeared in 12 games last year. He's obviously a specialist on this defensive line. He's a true edge build, a lankier, longer guy. Kind of lacked in the strength and size department his freshman year. Grew a little bit last year. We saw some productive plays from him last year, especially in that bowl game. Some really good moments getting after the quarterback, hurries. This year, it's a very crowded room. Be hard-pressed to say he has a definite role, a regular role in this room. But I think he can see some sporadic looks and be productive in those looks. It's going to be hard to keep Cassius Howell off the field. It's going to be hard to keep Rylan Kennedy off the field. But right behind them is Malik Silla. And there's another conversation you could have about Ian White, but of course he's not playing right now, so we'll cross that bridge when it comes. But Malik Silla can bring that to a team whenever you need it. If you need a specialist in there, you need an outside linebacker sub on in a passing situation, an extra blitzer, a fifth guy, maybe it's Malik Silla. Now, I don't know if he's a down-to-down guy. I don't know if you'll see him very often with how crowded this room has gotten. But keep him in the back of your mind for sure. Now we're kind of getting into the weeds here. Back to that receiver room. Now, if it's not Micah Tease, or even if it is Micah Tease, we're talking about 5 or 6 guys. The 6th guy I would want to see right now, and this could go a bunch of different ways, I would lean Jacob Bostic based on his maturity and his size. Now, you still have Isaiah Williams. You still have Ashton Bethel-Roman. Both of those guys have also drawn compliments this camp, but it's really wide open right here. Just kind of a shot in the dark here. That's why he's a sleeper. I would lean Jacob Bostic. He's a junior. His early college career was kind of slowed by injuries, taking a red shirt that freshman year, appeared in a few games the sophomore year. But that was an anemic Iowa offense, and by reports, he would have played a big role for Iowa this year if he had stayed. Now he's at A&M, a little bit more depth in that room than at Iowa. He's working from behind here. You know, the room has some guys at the top. But at 6'2", good athleticism, good range on his catching ability, I could see him finding a role for himself on this offense this year. So keep an eye on Bostic, but kind of in the same breath, you could say the same for Isaiah Williams and Jacob Bostic. Isaiah Williams and Ashton Bethel-Roman. But for me, it's Jacob Bostic at the top of that list. Now, I saved my favorite for last year. I teased this is the second DB we're going to talk about earlier when we were talking about Javen Thomas. Of the DBs you added to the room, there's some really big names. Des Ricks, Willie, kind of the top of that list there. Trey Jones, BJ Maines, these are all guys that can play. But the guy I think I'm most excited for is Marcus Ratcliffe. If you look at the film, coming from San Diego State, that was a bad San Diego State team. But he might have been their best player as a true freshman. He won their true freshman all-defensive player of the year award for them, but he had 48 tackles, 31 solo tackles. He played 3 different positions in the secondary. He played both safeties and nickel. He was all over the field. He's a big physical defensive back at 6'3", 210. He can do a lot of things, and he's a prototype Mike Elko DB, kind of fitting into that, like, it's not the comparison, but if you're going to say role for role, kind of in that Antonio Johnson role, a guy where you can kind of play him wherever you think he's strongest. And it's crowded out there, man. It's crowded. At nickel, we heard Jay Bateman today talk about Tyreek Chappelle and Jaden Hill as kind of the favorites in that room, but he was also very complimentary towards Ratcliffe. Now, they're going to dig deep into this bag for the DB room. I think it's well documented by now from all the coaches that they're going to use a lot of guys. I think there are ways you can use him. Let's say you're playing up against a team with a really good tight end. Let's say you're playing Mason Taylor versus LSU. You could throw in a big physical DB like Marcus Ratcliffe to cover him. Or maybe a more athletic tight end. I don't know. I'd have to look at who the tight ends we play this year. Haas out of Arkansas could be a guy that you want to use a Ratcliffe against. He's a guy that could be very serviceable in situational roles, but I think long-term, he might be one of the better DBs we see come through A&M once he develops maybe as a junior and senior. But all right, guys, those are 10 more players to add to your sleepers list. Like I said, top of the list, the Armage, the Fayus, the Celisars, the Rodas Johnsons. Those are guys you're going to see. But the back end of this list are some true sleepers I want you guys to keep an eye on, and those are guys that could be year one contributors under Mike Elko's Texas A&M. So guys, like I said, tell me who I missed. Tell me who are guys you're not that high on. If I mentioned them, that's fine. I want to hear from you guys. I want to get your opinions. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe. I appreciate you guys watching. I'll see you guys really soon. Thanks, and gig 'em.